I always like this little brief period of airtime while we're waiting for one platform to catch up with another, because
Right.
anybody could be here listening to this, but of course they're not usually right away. Right. So wow, I'm not seeing. Oh, aha ha.
There
There it
we go.
is. Ah, all right.
All right.
Dualistic Unity Social, the first Dualistic Unity Social since returning from Virginia Beach. We've actually had two pretty stellar episodes of Raw since we got back, and now we're here today. And I'm going to start this off by saying it's really just not fucking worth it. It's really not. And I mean that specifically about, the petty gripes, that thing that's kind of itching at you to want to think about and bitch about and, basically put your whole fucking day based on. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to get all bent out of fucking shape and hold that shit and make it heavy. It's not worth it for the small amount of fucking righteous juice that you will get out of doing so. It's just not. It's not. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. It goes nowhere. It does nothing. It does nothing except poison the rest of your fucking day. And every interaction you have is tinged with this little bit of fucking bitterness because you got to deal with this fucking shit that shouldn't have to be, wouldn't have to be, couldn't have to be, blah, 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 all the fucking thoughts. It's just exhausting. Just fucking let it go. It's not worth it.
Yeah, because tomorrow there's going to be something else. And the next day there's going to be something else and something else and something else. And it doesn't seem like that. It seems like, no, this thing is all encompassing. This thing is everything. Whatever the immediacy of the gripe is, and everyone has their thing and their stuff. And it's fascinating how we can focus on that, thinking that we're doing something like that's sitting here like just going through this whole whirlwind of potential perspectives and things is actually accomplishing something. Like it's doing something. It's like it's spinning your wheels. It's keeping your car in park and slamming on the gas. It's sitting in a rocking chair. It is pacing in circles. It is a dog chasing its own tail every single time. And it's not to say there aren't things, to take in. It's not to say discount everything that you think or everything that you go through, every perspective that comes into your mind, but to think you can do something about it within your head, within your mind, instead of it just being informative. Like it's just informative. It doesn't have to be this suck, this pull, this thing, because it's informative until you start trying to figure it out, right? Or overcome it or accomplish it. It's just what it is. But as soon as you try and figure it out, then it's like, well, it could be this, could be that, could be this. And then you get flooded with just potential perspectives, potential outcomes, potential situations that aren't it. Like they're not it. It's informative until then, and it's just interesting how much of my life I've spent thinking that it's doing something, thinking that it's getting me somewhere, that it's worth doing, anticipating a situation, worrying about a situation, wondering about a situation, where it's going to go, what it's going to mean. And it isn't worth it, because even all those things, like, they're going to play out. And the best you can do is just, be involved where you're at, paying attention to where you're at. Like this right now, like this is the extent of what you got. And each moment you have the opportunity. The beauty is that each moment you have the opportunity to show up as yourself, be yourself, or, try and follow something someone else is telling you to do, or look around the right way to do something. And so every opportunity is an opportunity to build that faith in yourself and just, you know, kind of trust your gut, your instinct. And that is cumulative. And that's something that I feel like I've never done in my entire life. That's how I've been feeling this week, is like, Jesus fucking Christ, have I ever been myself? Have I ever actually been myself? Have I ever not looked for how to respond? Because when you're being yourself, you're alone. And that's what another side of that is hitting me, that it's like there's no one to look to when you're being yourself. Like it's just what you are. And there's so much more of an ease to it, but then it's, it doesn't seem as like there's no validation outside of you just doing it and being it. You don't get that hit of like someone else telling you this is the right thing to do or the right way to act. It's like you are on your own in that. And there's a beauty in that and a freedom in that. It doesn't have the same sort of weight, but there's a difference, and it's it's an experience I feel like I am not very used to, but getting a little bit more acclimated even just this week.
It's funny because I remember one of our very earliest conversations in season 1, we were talking about the difference between not giving a fuck in response to giving a fuck, as opposed to genuinely not giving a fuck. And this is very much the same conversation, because you can decide, no, I'm gonna stop giving a fuck what anybody thinks of me. But you make it known that you don't give a fuck. Like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I'm not one of those people who gives a fuck. Anybody notice I don't give a fuck? Right? And you really do give a fuck, but now you give a fuck about being known that you don't give a fuck, because that's your response. And it goes in this wonderfully beautiful, vicious circle. As opposed to, and this is what I said to you early on, I don't even notice that there are people to give a fuck about. And it's just because I know they're not seeing me. I know they can't possibly see me. I know I'm not seeing them. I know I'm just living relative to an illusion, to assumptions I have about them, or to assumptions they have about me. Either way, we're not actually interacting with each other. And so I just don't think about it. I just go on about my life as if I am my life. And I am. But it's because I'm not entertaining that world of living relative to a fictional narrative of the world. And I think this is what Jesus was communicating in: be in the world, but not of it. Like, be here, but don't get tied up in all the stupid shit, because that's not the world. That's all your assumptions. That's all the narrative. This is why I was saying it's important to remember that the world you're thinking about is not the world that is.
Ever. Like ever. And that's and there's a part of me that's like I want that though. I want it to be at least a little bit, but if I let go of that, if I'm not as like, oh, but I want it to be a little bit of what I'm thinking, at least a bit of my assumption instead of like fucking nothing. Like it's not even there's no guarantee that it's anywhere close to my assumptions about myself. There's no guarantee that anyone has anything remotely close to that assumption. And what's been hitting me this week is like, I've held on to a certain assumption about myself a bit the last couple years for sure. And it was cutting me off from all these other perspectives of myself that I'm now getting a good look at. And it's humbling as fuck. And I appreciate it a lot because if you start, and this I guess can go for anyone, it's kind of like the world that we live in a lot of ways, trying to feel better about ourselves, trying to think of ourselves in a more positive way, and trying to just like create a reality in which that's the case and avoid certain things that may question that sort of assumption. And it cuts you off from yourself, because if you do have certain assumptions about yourself and like maybe a more negative idea, and then you start trying to build a positive idea on top of it, it's like that negative idea is still there. It's still there. You can't run from yourself. You can't hide. You can't suppress that. And as long as you're focused and trying to cerebrally maintain a certain perspective or thinking about yourself in a certain way, it's gonna it's gonna cut you off from being able to be yourself and like actually be yourself and not have that. nagging sort of judgment and voice, and the more you invest in a positive side, the more it's just distracting from the perceived negative that you don't want to look at, that you think there's something wrong with, instead of realizing there wasn't anything wrong with that. And then it's like, that's more freedom, because you can be alone in your reality without judging yourself so goddamn much. Because it's fucked, and it's fascinating how you can't really escape judgment, I guess, because I've gotten really good at just judging myself, as opposed to allowing anyone else to judge me. And now there isn't so much of a, it's like, I swear to God, I feel like this week is the first time that I've been cool with how I act. Like, I'm actually good with it. I'm like, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. I'm gonna show up as I'm gonna show up, and it's gonna play out how it's gonna play out. And holy fucking shit, dude, like, I've done a bunch of stuff in the last few years, and I may be being a little dramatic with that, but there's I know. But there's a side that feels like that. There's definitely a side that feels like that. Like, I'm actually, like, I can jump into things, and I still go back and forth for sure, and the fear comes up, but then it's like, all right, I'm there, and I can, like, you can have some fun with things too. Like, you can have fun with life. It doesn't have to be, and it's not to say that shit's not going to come up, scary stuff's not going to come up, fear, facing fears, dealing with stuff, going through brutal things, but, like, it doesn't have to, like, it is rooted in me. It is rooted in you. And, like, you want life to be a little bit less scary, more fun. It's like, be a little bit more fun. And that's something else that I've discounted, is that, like, and I'm probably not alone in this either, that, like, I am reality. Like, I am the root of my reality. I don't have to wait around for someone else to do something about it. And if you can be it, then it's like, it's mobile. Life becomes mobile, and it's wherever you go, you can do that and be that. And if you're not taking yourself so seriously, it makes it a lot easier to do that. If you're taking yourself seriously, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to live like that.
Exhausting, even. And it's funny because you were saying earlier, it's like it's not even just about thinking good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts. Eh, the farther down the spectrum you go with that, the more you start to realize that good almost becomes synonymous with certain and familiar, in which case all thought is kind of perceived as a good thing. And so you have to challenge that at some point. But we had a question on Instagram on this side, and I wanted to address it because it's important. Doesn't everybody want to have a certain amount of attention, but on the other side, also non attention? And so I like this because yes and no, it depends on how you're thinking about it, right? If you're thinking about yourself, absolutely, because thinking about yourself is always going to create this sense that you're not enough. There's always something to feed. And that thing is always attention. Whether it's your attention or the attention of others, it's always attention because that validates the idea of yourself that must be maintained. If you are to recognize that you are not that, truly recognize, not conceptually recognize, but to actually spend enough time on the other side of that fence, as it were, then all of a sudden you would recognize that none of that attention is really attention on you at all. It's attention on a fiction, it's attention on an idea. Whether it's their attention on an assumption or your attention on your assumptions, it's still attention on assumptions, which is taking away from attention to your life here and now, which is the reality of you as opposed to the thought.
And that difference, like, that you can actually just pay attention to reality, and you kind of don't have to be as concerned about yourself or think about yourself, and be focused on yourself, and, like, how you're doing. You're actually living life, and how you're doing isn't quite as relevant. It it's it doesn't have to be relevant at all because it can't even be known. Like, you can't even know it. Just being myself, just being. Yeah, like, that's well said, Amanda, because that's exactly it. There isn't you can't even be yourself. Like, as soon as you're thinking, like, am I being myself right now? You're thinking about stuff. You're putting something in the way. It is just being. And so everyone paying attention to reality and just existing without measuring quite so much, not trying to feel better because of other assumptions or bring themselves down because of deeper assumptions. Like, they're all just assumptions. And so as you continue to be and actually be involved and pay attention, your life kind of has a way, I guess, more so of playing out. And I feel like I'm speaking from, like, I don't even know. I like non-experience at all is how I feel like half the time. But again, it's like, there I go. You don't have to consider, it doesn't have to be about you doing things or achieving things or accomplishing things. It's like you're a a vehicle to experience. Your ability to have experience doesn't have to be measured. Like, experience can be just what it is. Like, it can actually just be what it is. You don't have to know how it's going because you can't. But, like, you can try. You can spend all day wondering, measuring, judging, and, like, oh my God, so much of the world, so much of myself has been just a consistent sort of measurement. I used to weigh myself every morning, would track, how much I was eating, would have an idea of, social media, check how many followers, how's this video doing? And it's like this web, this crazy web of how I'm doing. Like, that's a fiction that doesn't actually exist in reality and is going to be different for everyone, but it's my sort of web, and that's my fucking weight. It's all weight. Even when I feel like I'm like, the fucking measurement is above average, it's still false certainty every time.
It's interesting. The ability to measure things wasn't always something that we did. Like, it's something that we developed. At one point, we used to measure things by thumbs. All right. That's why we measure things by feet. It's because we used to actually use a foot, like a human foot, and we'd average it out. It's about this big, right? That's how we measured things. It wasn't accurate whatsoever. And then over time, we started developing like accurate ways to measure things. I remember the very first time when I was a kid, we took out this thing. It was a stick with a wheel on it. And it would just, as you walked and the wheel rotated, it would just count out the meters. Click, 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 click. So that ability to measure wasn't something that we did naturally in nature whatsoever. It took us time to evolve that and to learn how to do that. Same with time, right? It's not something we always tracked. I mean, fuck, it took forever for us to figure out the sundial. We're like, oh, look at that. It's kind of giving us an idea of what time it is. We're measuring our progress through the day. But now you can have a scale in your bathroom. You can have a watch on your wrist 24 hours a day. Like, there is always this consistent temptation to measure how you're doing, how fast you're doing it, where you're going to be next, to keep track of. And because of that, your brain just plays merry hell with the idea that somehow your value is going up and down because of it. And it's so funny because it's exactly it. Like, you could just be late one day. Maybe you missed your bus and you're going to school and you're going to be late for your class and you're like, oh God, I'm such a piece of shit. No, your value had nothing to do with that. You just didn't make the bus. And isn't that interesting? But immediately we start to measure our own value according to how we would compare ourselves to a bunch of assumptions that our brain just spat the fuck out. It's like, these are all the other things that could have happened. This is where you sit in that spectrum. and immediately we're like, oh, that's where I sit in that spectrum, not recognizing that there's a lot of other spectrums. There's a lot of other spectrums. Like, yeah, you might be late for school. On the other hand, you might be doing exceptionally well in terms of your personal development. You might not be a judgmental prick. Perhaps you're the kind of person who leans a bit more towards selflessness rather than selfishness, in which case you're doing quite well. It really comes down to what spectrum are you looking at? And we don't think about that shit at all. We just look at how we feel and we go, oh, that's indicative of how I'm doing. Nope. It's just indicative of how you see how you're doing right now. And that'll change if you just let it go.
Well said. Because as soon as you measure it on one end and you're like, you missed the bus. You're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit for missing the bus. Now you got to do something to counteract you being a piece of shit to feel better instead of it just being like, oh, I missed the bus. And that's the extent of the situation. And it's like, that's something that happened. It isn't something then because as I feel like I'm a piece of shit for missing it, then there's weight to that. And then it feels like it has to be counteracted and something has to be done about it. And it's it's fascinating, man, like how much we think we can know how things are going and how we're doing and how just entirely unnecessary it is. And the thought of of not taking yourself so seriously and being willing to play the fool. Like there's such a beauty in that and like so little weight to that if you just drop your own bar down cuz it's just as you said it's one, you know, funnel. It's one sort of siloed potential way is how you assume that you're doing. But there's a lot of times that it's humbling to the point that it's this reality you're so afraid of getting judged by. It's better for that, for you to be acting in certain ways or, not feeling as great and just continuing to go and continuing to do stuff and act from that point of a little more humility. And that because like yesterday on our calls, I was feeling, relaxed, loose, and like stuff was there, like our episode went great, had a blast, and I wasn't feeling good about myself necessarily. I was just there, like I could actually fucking hear things for the first time in what felt like months. Like I could actually be, and then there was there were things like going through my head, like thoughts about what was actually happening instead of fucking thoughts about myself. And to think that it would be better to know how I'm doing and feel like I'm doing well than actually being involved in reality, like having a fun time and enjoying it. Like it's insane that I would even consider one over the other. But it's like it's not an immediately easy thing to let go of until you start to get a taste for it. And then it's like, oh my God. Oh my God, that makes so much more sense. So much more sense to just actually be involved in reality and let myself go, like billow in the wind a bit. But because as you do, it's like you don't even know that you can until you do, and you're like, oh shit, I can do that. That is an option.
It's interesting if you were to imagine it this way. Imagine that you have a source of music. So there's a place where there is music playing, and you can get close to the music and enjoy the music and listen to the music and let the experience of the music carry you, or you can think about your opinion of the music. And every time you think about your opinion of the music, it's like you take a step away from the music. And in doing so, you get so lost in your opinion that you just keep walking away until you can't hear the music anymore. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't like that. I want to hear the music. And you start going back. And then all of a sudden your opinions kick back in and you start walking away. And so each of us are kind of finding our own little, okay, I'm good. I'm good here where I can hold on to enough opinions and still hear the music, despite the fact that it's getting fainter and fainter and fainter all the time. And it's just because we keep holding on to those opinions. We keep holding on to those things that draw us away from the music. And it's because without those opinions, who would we be? If I'm not my preferences, if I'm not my stance against this thing, who am I? you'll never find out if you're not willing to listen to the music and willing to listen to the entire song, in fact. And that's it. It's just that we get to a certain point where we're like, I don't like that. And we walk away from reality where we would learn why that, right? Why that and why we don't like it and where it fits in the rest of what we're experiencing. But we keep walking away from the music.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And it's I don't know, habitual in a lot of ways, but at the same time, not like at the same time, because you start to get a sense for the fact that you do it also. Like there's a point where you're not even aware of that. It's like you got to work through stuff to even get to the point where you even realize there is music playing. It's like you can be so far that someone says there's music playing out there. Like, what are you talking about? I don't hear shit. I don't hear anything.
And fuck you for assuming that I should hear it. You must be crazy. What music?
Oh man, yeah. What's the quote? Those dancing will always look crazy to those who can't hear the music. There it is. Something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Because there's no and hearing the music, like there's not the same sort of hit of I don't even know, like false certainty. Again, it's like hit of what? False false certainty. The sense of control. That's all we get. We don't get control. We get a sense of it, a feeling like while a feeling like we can while not being able to, while not actually having it, or of course, and ever. And yet there's like a pull sometimes, oftentimes, my mind to
I have a tie for you, actually. One thing I want to mention quickly before I give you this: we have a roundtable happening in a half hour. Anybody here who would like to be on an episode of Dualistic Unity and actually be part of the conversation? Maybe you have a project, maybe you have a business, maybe you just have shit to say. Definitely consider joining us. I'll throw the link up shortly after this. We have a comment on Instagram on my side, and there's more to it, but I want to focus in on this especially. Ambitious people want to be the best version of themselves. I would like you to explain the danger in that.
hold on, say that one again. Ambitious people want
Ambitious people want to be the best version of themselves.
Oh man. I Oh gosh. So as long as you're holding on to some idea of, oh my God, yeah, if that's ambition, then ambition is running on a treadmill with a carrot in front of you, straight up. Like straight up carrot mentality, like carrot and stick mentality all the time. You're never gonna get there. You're never gonna get there. I can't say that more emphatically enough. There is no point in which you get there as long as you keep running, as long as you keep striving for it. It's just your assumption that you're not it right now. It's the only thing that's keeping you ambitious. It's the only thing you can live your whole fucking life in that point of ambition, trying to get to a place, just do enough things, you just accomplish enough things, you just overcome enough fear, you just do enough that you finally feel like, and you never do. It's always out there. It's always somewhere out there, even when you get to a point where it's like, no, I did all of it. I did everything. You don't. There is no point in which you get to the spot that you're satisfied. There's no satisfaction in that ever. It's just a perpetual fucking loop in which you're constantly looking to tomorrow. And if you don't want to look at the fact that you don't feel like you're quite there, you'll just get excited about something, some fucking distraction from the fact that you're it. You're always it. You're always that highest value version of yourself right now, as much as you feel like you're not. Like, no, it couldn't be. Not this version. Got to be a little different. Got to be slightly different. Got to be somewhere else. It's got to be something else. Couldn't possibly be me right now as I am. Every single moment, letting the chips fall. See where they fall, still it. See where they fall, still it. See where they fall, still it. And you never get there. You can spend your whole fucking life, or at least a lot of your life, doing it, and it gets habitual because you don't realize that, there's assumptions that you're running from. You stop even becoming aware. You stop even being aware that there's assumptions that you're running from until you stop and you're like, oh, there's something. And the whole time, and stopping and just being like, oh shit, there is some stuff. There's nothing wrong with those things that you've been running from. There's nothing wrong once you settle. You're like, oh God, I've been running from these things the whole time. These fears I have, these concerns, these assumptions that you make when you're a fucking teenager. That and they're always going to be there no matter how much everything you do is to the contrary, as long as you're running to some perfect version. If you're running to some perfect version, assuming there was a point in which you weren't, you're never going to get to the perfect version, and you're never going to be willing to realize that there's actually strength in that. The wound is where the light enters.
Well said. Absolutely. And that's it, is that ambition always comes from that place of, I need to be more. I'm going to become the best version of myself. You already are. You are already the only version that could exist based on everything that you've gone through. So it's not that you'll ever be more, it's that you'll do more. And so that is a very different kind of ambition. That's not even ambition. That's just the recognition of existence. Right. Life is moving forward. It doesn't mean anything about you whatsoever. And that's where ambition turns to courage. Because ambition is very much the carrot and the stick mentality. Whereas courage is the recognition that life is moving forward. That the need for a reward necessitates the fear of punishment. Right? It's like, oh God, I'm going to get my reward. Oh, maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. And that's it. That's the world that you are in. So long as you need that reward. Once you don't, once it doesn't mean anything about you anymore, then it's just about you and life. And that's what people are afraid of. It's like, well, if I'm not chasing the carrot or running from the stick, why would I do anything? It's like, I don't know, because you can, because you exist. What the fuck else are you going to do with your time? Yeah, and that's it. Like, what else are you going to do with your time? And all of a sudden now we have to actually prioritize what we do according to our relationship with existence rather than the carrot and the stick, rather than that chase to become more. We actually have to reconcile, like, I've always been really curious about music. Not because I want to be a fucking rock star, but because I've always been curious about music. And you actually settle down and you figure that out for yourself instead of doing it. Everybody's going to love it. Oh, I'm going to play this at Christmas time. What are they going to think? Like, all it's just fucking useless. Like, all of that's useless. Whereas you could be sitting in your apartment alone in the silence, doubting your life, judging yourself, thinking about fictional conversations that'll never fucking take place ever. Or you could be strumming on a fucking stringed instrument, listening to the sound and really just listening to the sound, and enjoying that experience and getting familiar with that environment, because that really is the thing about ambition, right? We want to become better. It's like, no, you're never going to become better. You will get more familiar with what you're doing, but you will remain exactly what you are, you, with the accumulation of everything you've done and seen and experienced behind you. And that's the best you can do right now. So the entire idea of ambition, it just comes back down to that fiction of me. It's like, I need to be more. And what's funny about that, and this is something that I I love personally, I am not an ambitious person in that I have no need to prove anything or go anywhere. I could fuck off into the woods right now, be perfectly happy. Bye. uh, but I have no ceiling. I have no ceiling and I have no quit. See, to me, there's no limitation on what can be done. There's also no need to get anything done. And so life is my fucking playground. Life is my playground, and I can go to bed when I want to. And I get to play as much as I want. So if I want to put energy and attention into something because it's cool and I'm fucking enjoying it, that's what I'm going to do. But that's what happens when you no longer need the carrot and the stick. You're like, I'm going to build a treehouse. Why? Because I can. Well, you're going to hurt yourself. Yeah, probably. But I'm going to learn some shit about it. And that's pretty much it. It just changes your attitude about things rather than you becoming better. You're just enjoying your life more.
Oh man, yeah, the ambition is fucking tunnel vision. Like you don't take everything in when you're striving towards ambition. Like chasing the carrot, running from the stick is in a tunnel. And it's so funny because when you're talking about music, I started hearing music and I thought it was in your background. And now I'm realizing it is my neighbor. But it was like right at the time you started talking about music. I was like, interesting. Was Ray playing into like Celeste practicing guitar in the background or violin in the background? And no, it's coming from my apartment. That's kind of trippy right now. But back to ambition and no ceiling, like it's almost it's like the inverse that doesn't have a cap. If you have no ceiling and no quit, it reminds me a little bit of I did a run on some mushrooms last year at some point on a gram, and like I was into it for quite a while, and it was like one of the first times I ever didn't have a pull to keep going and didn't have a reason to stop. It was like neither were there. And so one way or the other, it was kind of like optional, but it wasn't tiring because it was just me continuing. And it was like, it was a gram of mushrooms and I wasn't thinking about myself very much. And that's such an experience that I feel like yeah, like, oh my God, the thought of strumming on a guitar and doing it for no reason about me is like makes a whole fuckload of sense now, but didn't most of my life. It's like, why would I do that if it doesn't make me more? Why would I do that? Like, what's the point? What's the reason? And it's like a fucking shell of life. A shell. Like we're not even experiencing life. I feel like part of me hardly has. And it's like, yeah, you are the whole time, but it's just it's like under a little bit of a fog in a sense. It's just fuzzy is all because you think you can be in control. You think you can know. You think you can be sure. And all that stuff just kind of piles on and makes all the experiences fucking foggy. Like every experience isn't if it's not for the point of the experience itself, then it's diminished immediately. Even if you feel like you're doing a good job, if it's for a reason, it's still not really holy shit. It's still not really like being there for it. And so if you're doing it for something else, even if it goes exactly how you hope that it does, exactly how you want it to, it still isn't like really being there. Like you're still shaded, you're still fuzzy, you're still foggy to it. And when you realize that, it's like, oh man, okay, all right. So if thinking that something's on the line at all times is actually just cutting me off from reality each and every moment, then I can I can also not do that. I can also just be involved moment to moment, and I'm actually there. It's like I'm actually experiencing reality instead of this fucking diluted, separated sort of version. And so, holy fuck, that's beautiful. Like that's really cool. Like
There is no secret ingredient. That was the whole point of Kung Fu Panda, right? He was trying to be more instead of just accepting who he was. It's fucking dope. We have a movie review of that, by the way. Anybody looking for it? Dualistic Unity movie review, Kung Fu Panda. Google that shit. It's awesome. And see it on YouTube if you can, because we got some clips in there. It's really good. This is a good conversation. I'm really looking forward to this. But this is the whole point of just being you, just being here. That's really all it is. We have 4 minutes left, so I just wanted to remind everybody you can join us on a roundtable. You don't have to be on the screen. If you don't want to join us on the screen, you can join us in the audience. We will be on Twitch and YouTube Live, as well as Twitter/X. Can we just call it X Twitter? That makes more sense to me.
that's a great thought. Oh shit! I wonder if there was any consideration of that. But I'm down to call it X Twitter now. That just makes it easier instead of like, it's Twitter. It's like whoever hears it is gonna get it in some way. I got a quick question. I can pass this back to you because it was about the playground statement. How do you be accountable to others if the world is fully your playground?
Well, the same way you would on a playground. I mean, if you're not respectful and aware and sensitive on a playground, it's not going to be playing for long. This is when you end up with like schoolyard fights and people picking sides, and all of a sudden somebody's feeling left out. You see, there's a lot of responsibility that goes with the playground. It means that everybody must be accounted for. Everybody is something to be considered. I mean, we're all in this together. There is no individuality in that way. I am the playground, which means that like every garden, it's something that we have to cultivate. Like anything, it's something that we have to pay attention to. So the idea that it's a playground doesn't in any way mean a lack of responsibility, but if anything, it means more responsibility. It means more attention, more empathy, more sensitivity. Otherwise, it's not play for very long.
Yeah, because you start to see your role in a sense. Not that you're filling a role, but there's potential for having sway, and you can, if you aren't taking yourself so seriously, there's so much more sway you can have as the playground, as the experience of an individual separate from the playground. But if you recognize you're the playground, then the world being the playground doesn't mean everyone is your toy to play with. Yeah, amen. And like there's repercussions, like there's consequences to our actions. Like just because you recognize that you are reality, you are the playground, doesn't mean there's not going to be fucking repercussions to everything that you do. It's just that you're more sensitive to the repercussions of everything that you do all the time. So like there's sensitivity. It's not just like, oh, it's my playground, no responsibility whatsoever. Cause like you're the playground. You're the entire environment and situation.
It's my playground.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what kind of experience do you want that playground to be? And like the crazy ass shit that we do is almost always, if not always, in response to certain things we're trying to make up for or overcome. Like the aggression, violence, killing, all that stuff it doesn't make sense when you recognize it's your playground, obviously, but it's in response. It's not just like, someone recognizes, oh, it's my playground, I'm going to go killing everyone. It's like,
Well, because they don't want to play the way I want to play. And that's how quickly it spirals out of control, right? Is that you get caught up in yourself. This must be this way. It's like that's not how this works. This is not this isn't a dictatorship. It's not a monarchy. It's not a democracy. It's an organism. It's one living organism. And if any one part of that organism decides that it needs to control the rest, that's called fucking cancer. And that's it. It's just thinking about it that way. We have about 30 seconds left.
yeah, this has been a lot of fun. These chats this week have been been something, to say the least. I'm very excited for this roundtable, and
Dude, I gotta say, they're always something. Like, I know it's so easy to take wherever you are and just go, wow, fuck, I was really like dragging ass before, but you could not have gotten here without that's the whole point. Like, the higher you get on the mountain, the more you have to recognize that you couldn't have gotten there without all of the other base camps before it. You know, all of the other attempts where you slid back down the fucking mountain, that all led to you being able to work your way up the goddamn mountain. Not that there's a mountain to get up, but you know what I'm saying. We're going to stop that there because that can get out of hand. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We will talk to you soon.